keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
It is a playoff football Friday, the first one of the 2024-2025 postseason, and the Broncos are in it. And I cannot wait. We've only got a couple of sleeps left to find out how the first postseason game since the Super Bowl year of 2015 is going to shake out. And they got a tall task. And I want to get into it with my guy, Will Petersen here. Will, how are you, man?
I'm great, Richie. I mean, it's crazy that we're finally here at this moment of we've been dreaming about the playoffs for a long time. We're 48 hours, less than 48 hours, 47 hours away from kickoff in Buffalo.
And I want to dig into all of it. I want to get into some keys to the game with you. I want to talk about the All-Pro announcement that came out earlier today. I want to talk about some potential stadium news.
Yeah.
That came before I do all of that. I want to touch on the Avs a little bit because you help us cover the Avs here at the station, and you're as tied in as anybody here in town. And they got a pretty big win last night.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was kind of encouraging after losing to a team like Chicago, who by and large, you shouldn't lose to if you're a team like the Colorado Avalanche, but sometimes it happens. It's an 82-game season. Some things break your way, some things don't. But, man, I just got to tell you, Mackenzie Blackwood, and I'm going to keep bringing this up with you, because you and I had this debate on this show multiple times, and I was so against it. I was, and I felt like, you know, my reasonings were rooted in logic, if not the logistics of it being a little unrealistic. But Mackenzie Blackwood, who totally fits the profile of the kind of goalie you were describing, has been magnificent. Since joining the Avs 1 month and a day ago, look at his goals against since putting on the burgundy and blue. And shout out to our guy, RF Dean, who covers the Avs very, very well down there at Ball Arena, for putting this together. 2, 2, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1. He has not allowed more than 2 goals a game since putting on the sweater.
I mean, it's such a refreshing change of pace, right? It's so nice to be able to win games 3-1 again, because that's how you're supposed to win playoff games, right? Not 6-5. And even I will say, you know, I advocated for a middle-of-the-road goalie. Mackenzie Blackwood's been well above middle of the road.
Oh, absolutely.
We got to give him his flowers.
Regardless of what he was considered, you know, in San Jose or before he got here.
Yeah.
Since he's put on an Avs sweater, he's been sensational.
Yeah, I mean, our guy Drew Spivak, who's the executive producer at 104.3 The Fan, thinks Mackenzie Blackwood's going to win the Vezina Trophy. And a lot of people kind of laugh at that. And then you see those kind of numbers and you're like, well, if he does that for another 4 months, could he get into the conversation? Who knows? And last night in Minnesota was just a perfect example of the Avalanche got out to a quick start, and you never felt like they were going to give it up, right? Once you're up 3-1 after the first period with Blackwood between the pipes, you're like, we can just cruise through the next 40. And even Nathan McKinnon said after the game, you know, we weren't all that fast tonight, but everyone contributed. Everyone did their part. We were coming off a late night in Chicago. And if you're reading between the lines, McKinnon said, we didn't even play that great, but because he's a brick wall back there, we knew we were going to win. They add on 3 in the third period to sort of pour it on. And next thing you know, it's a 6-1 laugher. Yeah, Mackenzie Blackwood, Chris McFarland, it's the best move of his GM tenure, and it's not even close.
Yeah, listen, I mean, we look at you know, the moves that the Nuggets made, the pieces that like Calvin Booth brought in leading up to that championship year with Bruce Brown and KCP. And looking back in hindsight, we're like, wow, particularly with those 2 additions, that's what took the Nuggets from a perennial second round knocking on the door but falling short team to hoisting their first Larry O'Brien trophy in franchise history. And I guess the question I was going to ask you was, are you feeling it again when it comes to the Avs? Are you, because prior to you know, the trades, when it was Georgiev, and even a little bit, to be frankly honest with you, during the cup run with Kemper and Frankie, it was like, I don't know if they can survive this. I don't know if they can. Are you starting to feel a little bit of the mojo, a little bit of the juice back when it comes to like confetti test for the Colorado Avalanche right now?
Oh, totally, man. I would clear your calendar in late June, and that's not hyperbole, because you look at it, they had this really slow start. They were 14-13. They're like 5 points out of the President's Trophy all of a sudden in the NHL. There's no elite team that's completely pulling away from everyone. So yeah, why not the Avs? And why not, once you have a star goalie in there, can you throw your second parade in 4 years? Again, I'm just trying to tell it how I feel right now. I talked to Mike Evans about this on the Mile High Hockey podcast.
Shout out.
They are the best team in hockey right now in my eyes, because if you extrapolate what they're doing with Blackwood and to some extent Wedgwood before he got hurt, they would be running away with the President's Trophy. They would be stacking all the points. The fact they were 500 through 27 games, Richie, and they are where they are now halfway through the season, this team's red hot, and I can only assume they're going to continue to stay red hot.
To answer my own question, I'm with you. I agree. I think I totally can see it again. I was so ready to put that, as far as this season goes, put that vision back in the closet for at least another year. But with the addition of Mackenzie Blackwood, and honestly Scott Wedgwood too, who's been pretty awesome in his own right prior to getting hurt, and we'll see what his recovery timeline looks like. I can see it again. And if they are able to make another run to the Stanley Cup final and you know, maybe win another one in the second in a handful of years, I do think that, to your point, for Chris McFarland, this is his Bruce Brown and KCP. This is that move that completely turned the tide and shifted them into an entirely new team identity.
Well, and the dirty little secret was Alexander Georgiev wasn't going to win a Stanley Cup. And the last couple of years, we sort of tried to talk ourselves into it, and Valeri Nichushkin's absence was a convenient excuse, but Georgiev wasn't good enough. He wasn't consistent enough. And honestly, I've said it to you before, I'll say it again, it wasn't fun. Like, he was a fun zapper. He sucked the fun out of Avalanche hockey because it was too many times we had to come in and talk about Georgiev had to do the skate of shame again. He got benched again.
Yeah.
I give them credit. They went into camp with him and they pulled the plug very quickly. And that was smart on the Avs part, that you know, sometimes in pro sports, these GMs can't sit around and wait. And they cleaned house within 10 days and are reaping the rewards of two phenomenal goalie trades.
Yeah, when you get a Mikko Rantanen hat trick that doesn't somehow turn into a win for the Colorado Avalanche, that to me is just where you draw the line. And I don't know, man. There's still a long way to go. I don't want to put any carts in front of the horse, but you alluded to a quote there from McKinnon and some of the guys in the locker room where, like, and they've alluded to it several times, really, honestly, starting with Scott Wedgwood, of just a looseness or a freedom or a weight that's lifted off of their shoulders. And when you've got a team with the amount of firepower they have on their first two lines and the amount of talent, when you're talking about, I don't know, Will, 5 of the top 20 skaters play for the Avalanche, on the offensive side. When you can take a team that has that much firepower and that much talent and then give them the mentality of, like, hey, even if we're at 80% of our game, because you can't be on 100 for 82 games, of course, the better part of a year, that they have the faith in the guy between the pipes to be able to dig him out of those holes. What better could you ask for? No, there's not much you could ask for, because, like you said, there's now a looseness in this locker room of guys are honestly relieved, I think is the right word, Richie. Like, I was in that locker room many a times when Georgiev and Onanen were still on the team. It was a grumpy room, especially after losses. And it was, fans are asking, ask Nathan McKinnon about this. And I'm like, guys, Nathan McKinnon's on I-25. Like, he left this arena. He gone. He's not talking to the media. And now when you walk in, there's a freeness. There's a happiness. Yeah. They're handing out the big hat almost every other night. There's an excitement. Like, you talk about things just flipping like that. That's what happened. And it truly was instantaneous, because I remember Scott Wedgwood's first game coming in and getting the win, and him getting the big hat in the first game. It's like, they've been dying for this. Yes. And just at the first sign of life, it just felt like there was a reinvigoration in that room. So the mindset that the Avs have now compared to the mindset that they had, 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, is in a much better place. And as it relates to mindset, when it comes to the Denver Broncos, I think that their mindset heading into this game is something that's going to be fascinating to watch unfold, because you got a team full of guys, at least, the vast majority of them, with no playoff experience. You're looking at guys like Mike McGlinchey and Zach Allen to be like and some of those have more postseason experience than the other, but these are the guys that are going to have to tell an entire team what it's even like to play in a playoff game. Yeah, no, it's interesting. We've talked about that a lot on Denver Sports Tonight on the Fan this week of, who on this team has playoff experience. You mentioned McGlinchey, Allen, Ben Powers in Baltimore. But really, I think they have to lean on the head coach, Richie, because Sean Payton has coached in 17 playoff games, and he has a 9-8 record in those 17 playoff games. Being over 500 in the playoffs is really tough. For perspective, Mike Shanahan is 8-6 in his NFL head coaching career in the playoffs. 7-0
on the 2 Super Bowl runs, 1-6 all other times in his career. People look at 9-8 and say, that's not that great a record. Well, in the playoffs, it is a great record. So I agree, like the veterans who have been there, they have to lean on. But I think it's Sean Payton. I thought his press conference on Wednesday was phenomenal, talking about we can't have behavioral penalties. I love the way you put it, behavioral. Like, don't commit a stupid personal foul. And then also, he said playoff mistakes have greater consequences. Josh and Cecil love to do, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy who gets a dumb 15-yard penalty and costs the Broncos a chance to upset the
guy
Buffalo
who sacks Josh Allen on a breakaway play on 3rd down, but then gives up a celebration penalty or a taunting penalty or something like that. Real quick plug, by the way, Denver Sports Tonight for the entirety of the Broncos postseason run here going until 9 o'clock. So we got extended DST into
done that the last 4 nights. It's been a lot of fun.
Into the wee hours of the night there. And
it's been great.
I've enjoyed listening to you guys because I find myself oddly on the road a lot of those times.
There you go.
Late at night. So I've certainly enjoyed it, and all of you out there can as well. Peyton Manning joined our morning show this morning, Stokely and Evans with Mark Schlereth, at not the wee hours of the night, the wee hours of the morning at about 6:45. So if you haven't heard it yet, go back on demand at denversports.com or on the app and listen to that in the 6 o'clock hour. But I thought what Peyton said, by and large, because Peyton's always great when he talks. He opens his mouth and I want to listen.
Exactly.
But he had a comment as it relates to, he was asked to give advice to the team. And I found it interesting because I think it mirrors the conversations we've all been having, not just preparing for Buffalo, but preparing for a postseason game and all of the weight and the gravitas that comes around it. And Peyton said, make sure that you just keep doing the things you've been doing. Because, and this is a guy that has had, more playoff experience than I'll ever shake a stick at, obviously. But he said in his experience, so many times it's easy when you get to the postseason, you tighten up, you clamp up, you buy into the mental aspect of everything else that's at stake. And you start saying, hey, we got to practice more. We got to watch more film. We got to do this. We got to do that. You're almost like chasing yourself in a certain degree. And he just said, no, do the things you've been doing the way you've been doing them, because look where it's gotten you.
Right.
And while that hasn't always, while the Broncos had to it took a little bit longer maybe to clinch that postseason berth than they wanted, than we wanted, maybe than a lot of us expected. I do think that that's going to be a mindset that translates into a key to victory for this team, not just in the preparation, but in the game plan and execution of it. Because, one of the things we've talked about all year long with the Broncos is the lack of run game. They just can't figure it out. And it's like, hey, if they're going to beat the Chargers, they got to run the ball effective. They got to establish the run. If they're going to beat the Bengals, they got to do it. Well, they didn't do it in both of those times. But in both of those times, they showed success early on or late in the case of the Bengals, and it just fell apart. So heading into this Bills game, there's going to be a part of me, and I didn't really think about it until Peyton Manning said it, that is just like, hey, don't try to create some magic elixir to fix the problems you've been having. Just go do you. So what I expect from the Bills game this weekend, probably not going to run the ball that great. And you know what? That's okay. Try to establish it. They always seem to try. And when it doesn't work, and that time that they decide that it doesn't work is very different, from time to time. So maybe if I was going to Sharpie something into Sean Payton's Denny's menu play sheet, it's just be you. Just be you. Try to run the ball. When it doesn't work, because it probably won't, turn it loose with Bo Nix. Throw it all over the yard and do what you got to do. What do you think about that mentality?
No, I love it because, like you said, January isn't the time to establish an identity. You establish an identity in July and August. It's why I was so frustrated in overtime against the Bengals on that 3rd down. They went to Troy Franklin because it's like, guys, quit trying to make Troy Franklin happen. He's not going to happen. It's like Mean Girls. Quit trying to make Fetch happen, and don't try to make the run game happen if that's just not what got you to this point, got you to 10-7. Back to Peyton Manning's comments. You can't be totally different than what put you in the playoffs for the first time since 2015. Listen, if you want to feed Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin, I can picture Audric in LA going for 7-8 yards of carry. I can picture Jaleel in Cincinnati going for 7-8 yards of carry. But if it's not working and Bo has to throw it 40 times, there's going to be this uprising. And I'm with you. I won't understand it. Guys, you got here with Bo Nix throwing it 40 times. Your only way to keep up with Josh Allen is probably Bo Nix throwing 40 times. So don't throw a hissy fit if you look at the box score and Bo Nix threw it 42 times. That's your best chance to win the football game.
And I will say that, on the heels of just saying that, I don't want to fully contradict myself, but if I was to add one thing that we've seen them kind of go away from on the latter half of the season compared to the front half, that I think could be useful is let Bo Nix run the ball more.
Yes,
even if it
design
means,
runs.
Even if, not just scramble plays where he just makes a move like he did against the Chiefs and kind of, ended up getting called back a good chunk of it. But, not just reactionary runs, called design runs, make that an element that the Bills defense has to stop. But I don't think that that's fully saying, going against what I just said about being you, because that's who they were at the first half of the season, and it worked, and I just think they went away from it. But yeah, man,
well, he's their most effective rusher, Richie.
So he's led the team in rushing at least 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, I don't think fans would have a problem if Bo Nix is running the ball, because he's proven this year that's an element of his game that's much better than any of us realized when the Broncos drafted him.
And it flies in the face of so many things we've said in week 5, 6, 11. Where it's just, hey, you're asking too much of a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix. Well, you've been asking too much of a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix for 3 months now,
so
4 months
now.
So why stop now? Yeah. And while I don't believe in my soul in the concept of orange slices and moral victories and things like that, the Broncos are in the postseason, but that to me doesn't just mean, hey, you're playing with house money, it's all gravy. You go out there and get shellacked 42-3, by the Buffalo Bills, like we saw the Patriots, like we saw happen to the Patriots at the hands of the Bills in the Mac Jones playoff year. That's not
been spending too much time with Maryland. If I never have to hear about Mac Jones ever again,
but here's what I'm saying. I do think that there's James and I agree on almost nothing, so we don't have to worry about that.
I know.
But I do think there's levels to it. Like, I don't think it's like, hey, you go out there and you get stumped. It's like, well, hey, we made there will be a time where we can say those things. The time is not now. You and I have had that perspective conversation before. So, but if you go out there and you stay true to your identity, to go along the lines of Peyton's quote that I really enjoyed from this morning, and the dice don't fall your way, but you lose a competitive game, 38-31 or 27-20 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm good with that, and I think it says a lot going forward.
Yeah, and I get that. And my James and I had this debate last night. My pushback to James is they've only gotten blown out one time all year, right? So he keeps saying, well, if they lose, then we still don't learn anything about him. And I've said, well, we learned a lot about him in Kansas City. Yep. If Alex Forsythe can throw a block, they beat the Chiefs. We learned a lot about him in Cincinnati. If Sean Payton can just trust his gut and keep holding up the 2 and go for 2, they could beat the Bengals. If they go for it on 4th and 5 in LA, they probably beat the Chargers. Like, they've been competitive with really good teams all year. So even if they get blown out, I'll actually give you a little pushback. I'm not going to hit the panic button of,
no.
The season wasn't great or whatever. No. But it just they've played competitive games all year. Literally, other than one game, they have been competitive all year. That's why I expect them to be competitive. And even if it does, and I'm not saying it's gonna, but even if it does look like the Baltimore game, I'm not going to have some knee-jerk reaction that the whole season was
really
a failure.
Will, even with that Baltimore game, it was only an uncompetitive 2 quarters, really, 2 and change, because
the very end of the first half sort of spiraled that game out of control.
That sequence at the end of the first half, and then Baltimore gets the ball back. I mean, Bo Nix left the field being down 1 score, and then by the time he gets the ball back in the third quarter again, it's a blowout. So even with that, I think that there's nuance to it. And I want to shout out some of the people chiming in here in the comments. Our guy Marco was saying that the middle of the field, when it comes to the defense, that middle of the field, that linebacker core, which we've seen really since the days of Danny Trevathan, we haven't seen a stout middle linebacker or inside linebacker presence here in Denver, but we saw the Bengals heavily target and exploit that. And we've seen other teams do it throughout the year. I think the Broncos, their pass rush, kind of their front 4 especially, has spoken for themselves. We'll get into the all-pro mentions and things like that toward the end of the show. And I think the back end, the secondary, led by Pat Surtain, but also Riley Moss and Brandon Jones and PJ Locke and, that kind of crew, they have, by and large, held their own in a lot of situations in this game. But that middle of the field, that Cody Barton territory, I think is something that is going to kind of feed into what I would consider to be a second key to the game. You can see the comment there below. They have got to find a way not to just get eaten alive by the likes of a Dalton Kincaid or a Khalil Shakir over the middle. Because let's be real, and this was an interesting conversation I'd like to get your thoughts on. The Buffalo Bills, now that Stephon Diggs is no longer there, they don't just have an automatic. I know Amari Cooper's on the team, but they don't just have an automatic, hey, they've got a Jamar Chase, a Justin Jefferson, a guy that your best player is going to go up against their best player, and that's what PS2 is going to do.
Yeah.
They don't have that. They've just got a smaller collection of kind of like slightly lower tier guys, but all guys that can take the top off, that can play, that can kind of find the soft spot in a defense, which in a way could make them more dangerous, because as a defense, it's not as easy to pinpoint, hey, this is what we got to do. If we can just neutralize this, the Bill Belichick philosophy is I'm going to take away your best piece and make you do it with the surroundings. They've been doing that all year, and they're arguably better for it.
Yeah, I mean, to Marco's point, the Alex Singleton injury wasn't really felt, and that's not a diss on Alex Singleton, but then all of a sudden, you played the Chargers in LA and Justin Strnad got exposed. And then you played the Bengals and they did the same thing. And Strnad and Barton both had tough days. That's when you really felt the Singleton injury. So yes, I trust the front four. I trust the secondary. It's the guys in the middle that could decide if the Broncos win or lose this game. And you wish a guy like Alex Singleton could be out there. He's not. He's not going to magically heal from an ACL that he tore in Tampa in time. So Strnad was a key to the game that I brought up on Denver Sports Tonight. We were doing under the radar players. Didn't think our season was going to hinge on Justin Strnad in July, but it could on Sunday. It's a good point by Marco. Good point by you. It's one to watch for sure.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how Vance Joseph is preparing to approach this. The Bills run a lot of those bunch formations. They get guys kind of grouped up, and then you run the formations and the branches off of it. But I really think it makes an interesting question. I talked to James Palmer about this earlier in the week about how you deploy a guy like Patrick Surtain, who we've seen shadow, opposing teams, stronger threats beyond just the outside corner position. We saw him kind of lock in on Brock Bowers as a tight end, who they split out here and there, but sometimes they don't. And I'll be really curious to see how they deploy against that kind of bunched platoon set of receivers, because that, in addition to just the middle of the field, which we discussed, the ability to hold up in the secondary just a smidge longer to allow the formidable pass rush to be able to try to rank. I mean, we saw they struggled at times to bring down a guy like Anthony Richardson because of his size and his physicality and all that. Well, Josh Allen is like Anthony Richardson plus, who can also throw the football, 80-something yards with accuracy. So they're going to experience some of those same problems. It's like trying to tackle a Honda Civic to a certain degree. And because of that, I think especially when Josh Allen, who is fully capable and happy to eat you up from the pocket if you let him, but if you force him outside, you flush him outside, that just puts a lot of pressure on that secondary with some of the unique formations that they're going to face to be able to hold up in time for Nick Bonito and company to try to get after Josh Allen.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you have to design a game plan that is not vanilla if you are Vance Joseph. You have to make Josh Allen your sole focus, because Richie, when you go through this Bills roster, it's Josh Allen, it's James Cook, and it's a bunch of guys. Like Josh Allen dragged this team to 13-3, and I know they went 13-4, but I'm not counting last week because Allen didn't play. It makes his MVP case even stronger.
Oh yeah,
it really does, because you look around, they don't have a 1,000-yard receiver. They don't have a guy on the roster with double-digit sacks. Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, these are not household names unless you're a fantasy football player.
They're kind of similar. I think they're kind of similar in essence, regardless of the stats and how they shack up. They're kind of similar in essence to how we look at the Broncos defense, in a sense, that it's a lot of guys that are not household names yet, but they're guys that can play. So you say Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and those are more.
I'm not disrespecting them, but
I know. I just want to make that clear.
They're not Jamar Chase and T. Higgins.
Correct.
They're not.
Correct. They're not. And I think that's that potential underestimation, just from a national perspective or whatever it is, or even here locally, is what can set you up to kind of get punched in the mouth at times and things like that. So I agree with you, and I just think that if they're not careful, we're going to see a situation where, the likes of a Keon Coleman or a Khalil Shakir are streaking down the sideline, and there's nothing schematically that we can do about it, because you can't just play one scheme. Josh Allen, it's been documented time and time again, he dices up man coverage. And so that's been some of the times the Broncos have been able to single up on the outside and say, hey, Riley Moss, Pat Surtain, you're going to hold up and we're going to get after this guy. Josh Allen is excellent in those situations. So you kind of have this chess match going on of like Buffalo in some ways matches up well against, sometimes it's good on good. And then in other times it's a situation where, with a physical mobile quarterback, those are areas that can give a defense problems. So I think, who's got a taller task on Sunday? Vance Joseph trying to slow down Josh Allen or Sean Payton trying to put an offense together that's going to be able to score the amount of points necessary in a hostile environment with weather conditions like Orchard Park?
Yeah, I think it's VJ. I mean, the guy's the MVP for a reason. The Bills defense gave up 44 in LA. They gave up 42 in Detroit. I mean, it's not that scary of a defense. We all love Von Miller, but Von Miller's not Von Miller of his prime. He's a rotational defensive end at this point. He had 6 sacks this year. I think it's VJ for sure, because if he can keep Josh Allen with the first number of 2, Richie, that's my prediction.
Mm-hmm.
If the first number is a 2, the Broncos have a chance to win this game, meaning Josh Allen can score up to 29 points and they can walk away victorious. If Josh Allen gets in the 30s, that's going to be a really tough task for the offense.
Yep, I agree. And I think that one of the other kind of keys to the game, and by the way, on your note about the MVP case, you can make the argument as it relates to Lamar Jackson that he's not actually the driving engine or the focal point behind the offense.
No,
it's Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
But it's the two of them together in the fact that you have a dual threat quarterback like Lamar Jackson and one of the best rushers in the NFL in Derrick Henry, that like if both of those guys are clicking, how do you stop them? Well, Josh Allen has drug. I mean, maybe that's a little bit dismissive, but has dragged this team to where they're at the 2 seed. Without that, now James Cook can make some plays out of the backfield in the receiving game, and they're a little bit more versatile, I think, with their playmaking ability, but it's definitely not the same sledgehammer. So let's see. We got a little bit of time left. Prediction wise for this game, before we get into kind of the last couple of things here, what you said, if it starts with a 2, that the Broncos have a chance to win. Do you think the Bills score will start with a 2 when it clock hits 0?
No, I mean, I made my official prediction last night on Denver Sports Tonight, because it's going to be Mike Rice and Marcello Romano tonight. So I figured I'd do it when I was on the air, and I'll do it here with you now. The Bills' first number is going to be a 3, but it's not going to be that high. I think the Broncos lose a heartbreaker, Richie. And that, to me, it's not me, being a downer, but I'm also not being a homer by picking Denver to win. That, to me, is the epitome of playoff growing pains with a really young roster and a rookie quarterback. I don't think they get blown out, but I think Buffalo wins 31-28.
31-28. Okay.
That was my official prediction.
That's close to.
Are you offering? It's Friday. You're offering one up.
That's close to what I had. I said going into this week that if the Broncos were going to have a chance to keep pace, because I do think that VJ has a taller task, and I think in some ways, just like a lot, 17 other teams experienced this season, it's not an easy task to try to slow down a guy like Josh Allen. The production that they have offensively is among the best in the league, and in the postseason, Josh Allen has been nails compared to the regular season where you've seen it. So if you were going to have a chance to try to slow that down, you have to force Josh Allen to do something that's, historically speaking, he hasn't done in the postseason, which is turn the ball over. Mm-hmm. He's got a pretty solid touchdown to interception ratio in the postseason. So the only thing I could hope is that you get them in long down and distance situations, or you keep it tight enough to where Josh Allen might feel like he has to go play some hero ball and just, sling it down the field, or maybe push a pass where he, because of the arm talent that he has and maybe some of the potential arm arrogance, makes an errant throw that you can capitalize on. But it's not an automatic. This isn't like an Anthony Richardson situation where it's just like, hey, if you get this guy to keep pushing it, eventually he's going to give you a lollipop. This is not that. And with all that said, I do think that the Broncos lose this game. I had it at a score of 33-27.
Okay, so we're right in the same ballpark.
In that same thing, 33-27, because I do think that there's going to be some kicker points involved on both sides. I think there's going to be some ugly, muddy, stalled drives, especially if it's inclement weather.
Yep.
So I'm all with it, and I agree with some of the commenters here. All the pressure is on Buffalo, and that is true. I just think this is a situation, as much as they have overachieved and outkicked their projections, them being the Broncos this season in the first year of a rebuild with a rookie quarterback. I just think that eventually there's a situation where you just run into a team on paper that's just better than you.
Yeah. Buffalo's supposed to win the Super Bowl. And guess what? If they don't, they're going to fire their coach, depending on how far they get.
You think so?
Oh, if the Broncos beat them, Sean McDermott's getting gassed the next day.
We think so, because the drive with Zach and Phil had some local reporters and beat writers on from Buffalo this week, and they did not say, they almost seemed to scoff at that notion, because I kind of lean with you where this is
you're wasting Josh Allen's prime.
I agree.
And that Bills Mafia has had their heart stomped so many times, never won a Super Bowl. There's no way if you let a 7 seed with a rookie QB come into your backyard and beat you. But you know what? That's Buffalo's problem, not our problem.
And listen, they're Buffalo, you just alluded to it, has had their hearts ripped out in the postseason. Most of the time it's been by Patrick Mahomes.
Yes.
But who's everybody's problem. But it's not exclusive to that. We saw the Bengals go in there and beat them with Joe Burrow. And things like that. So it's not impossible. We've seen Buffalo lose games in the postseason that they're supposed to win.
Totally.
And the possibility totally does exist for Denver to go in there and do that because all the pressure is on their opponent. And they kind of are feeding off of that young, exuberant energy. That's the most connected that I personally think we've seen them since the Peyton Manning years, as a team. And so Buffalo might get their heart broken in this postseason. I just would be surprised if it was Denver that did it.
Be fun if it was.
It'd be fun if it was. And if it does happen, where we'll be right back here at 12 p.m. on Monday. I guess it's not morning, Monday afternoon to break it all down for you. So I and Will, like all of you, will be waiting with bated breath until Sunday at 11 a.m. And I can't wait to dig into it again after the weekend.